So what comes to mind when you hear the name Cronenberg? Violence? Horror? Exploding heads? Murder? Twisted plots? You'd be right if any of those descriptions come to mind. Some call Cronenberg the master of body horror. However, the director rejects this moniker and refers to the body as beautiful, outside and within. You may have wondered what director David Cronenberg has been up to recently. Well, he's been busy writing books and making short films and acting in small parts in friends' movies and in television. But recently, David Cronenberg has returned as the director with his latest creation for your enjoyment or disgust, in a tale of the not-too-distant future where humanity is evolving. Hi, I'm Rob, and today we are looking at David Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future on A Constantly Racing Mind. Crimes of the Future is his latest offering. Now, this film is not to be confused with a movie of the same name that he wrote and directed in 1970. The stories are totally different, mostly. So before we get into the film, let's take a quick look at what you can expect from a David Cronenberg film. I think this is important because you gotta understand the mentality of David Cronenberg. He started his career in the 1960s, Toronto, Canada, with short films. Then by 1970, he came up with his first Crimes of the Future movie, which was about a character called Tripod, a former director of a dermatological clinic called the House of Skin. Now he is looking for his mentor, the mad dermatologist Antoine Rouge. Rouge has vanished after a devastating pandemic caused by beauty cosmetics that killed the entire population of sexually mature women that are fertile and can have children. It has allegedly claimed the life of Rouge himself after the virus mutated to affect men. Now, Tripod joins several organizations, including Metaphysical Import-Export and the Oceanic Podiatry Group, and meets a variety of guys attempting to acclimate to a defeminized world. For example, one man mocks childbirth by regularly developing new organs removed from his body. Now, keep that in mind. Tripod eventually comes into a gang of pedophiles harboring a young girl, a 5-year-old girl, and is persuaded to mate with her. However, he detects Antoine Rouge's presence. Tripod enters the room where the girl is being held and takes off his shirt, only to be startled by the girl's lips emitting a cream-like white foam. Also keep that in mind. Now, Tripod discovers that his nipples produce the same stuff. Now, this leads him to understand that he has infected the young girl with the virus by artificially forcing puberty on her. Both the girl and Tripod are now doomed. Now, this film was shot as a silent with a commentary added afterwards. Now, I never saw the film, only on YouTube researching for this presentation. Now, I remember back in the early 80s watching his films either in the theater or on VHS, renting the films out of curiosity. Some films are not meant to be seen, they are intended to make you think. Now, I never really thought much philosophically about David Cronenberg films. When you see Videodrome when you're barely hitting your 20s, a movie about TV snuff films with political and psychological implications as technology is used to cull North America, essentially turning the viewer's brain into mush. Hey, YouTube! Actually, I saw the film only because Debbie Harry from the band Blondie was in it. 1981 Scanners was just plain wrong, but when you see a horrible car accident, you just keep watching and you can't look away. There is the 1990s film about the car accident about folks who get off by getting into car accidents just to get horribly mangled and to use surgeries to keep them together. In Scanners, we have people who can scan others' thoughts, and a group of these mutants want to take over the world. A lone scanner is recruited to help a group of resistance fighters keep the others from world domination. Later, Cronenberg directed an adaptation of Stephen King's The Dead Zone in 1983. Another film at its center is the extraordinary ability of the main character, played fantastically by Christopher Walken, to see the future. Walken's character uses his ability as an extension of himself to help humanity. And of course, there's the 1986 remake of The Fly, starring Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis. Now, this is where two actors met and would fall in love, get married, and later divorced. In real life, that is. But in the film, we see the remarkable transformation in the most disgusting way, how Seth Brundle, played by Goldblum, metamorphosizes throughout the film in front of Davis's character, Veronica. He turns into Brundlefly, a man with fly DNA taking over his body at the genetic level. Here, technology is the catalyst of the transformation. In 1988, Cronenberg and writer Norman Snyder wrote Dead Ringers with Cronenberg directing, a highly fictionalized story based on twin brothers who are gynecologists. They seduce their patients and trade off their relationships with one of them. A strange and twisted film starring Jeremy Irons, playing both doctors whose addiction and fetishes find them in a bad place in life. Now, journeying into the 1990s, Cronenberg was drawn to Naked Lunch, the surrealistic science fiction drama written and directed by David Cronenberg and starring Peter Weller, based on the semi-autobiographical William F. Burroughs novel of the same name. Now, in this film, exterminator William Lee discovers that his wife Joan stole his pesticide supply to use as a recreational drug in 1953. Lee begins to suspect that he is a secret spy, and his superior, a huge talking beetle, assigns him the task of assassinating Joan, who is purportedly an operative of Interzone Incorporated. Now, Lee ignores the beetle's commands and kills it. When Lee arrives home, he discovers Joan having sex with one of his writer pals, Hank. Shortly after, he accidentally kills her while attempting to imitate William Tell by shooting a drinking glass off her skull. Now, the story devolves into a drug-induced psychedelic hallucinogenic exploration of the inner psyche. But in 1993, he took a break from the weird and strange to make an adaptation of David Henry Hwang's play of the same name, and Butterfly. Now, this is a beautiful story of a French diplomat in 1960s China who falls in love with a Chinese opera singer. 1996, Cronenberg directed a film in which he wrote the screenplay based on the J.G. Ballard's 1973 novel of the same name, Crash. Another strange and unnerving film starring James Spader as James and Holly Hunter as Helen, two people who find themselves in a hospital after a horrendous car crash with each other. That's the same accident that killed Helen's husband. She doesn't seem too upset and starts a relationship with Spader's character, also named James. The two start a fetish of car crashes, ultimately realizing that the result of their extreme fetish is death. In eXistenZ from 1999, there is a biotechnological virtual reality game consoles known as GamePods, which will replace electronic ones in the near future. The pods contain umbicords, which connect to bioports connections surgically implanted into the spines of participants. The Realists, a group of zealots, are fighting to prevent reality from becoming deformed. A realist shoots Allegra, a world-renowned game designer played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, in the shoulder with an organic pistol he smuggled past security. A game within a game. Don McKellar stars in this film as well, playing a realist. In addition, McKellar plays Whippet with the National Organ Registry in Crimes of the Future. Oh yeah, just a reminder, The Matrix, the cyberpunk film by the Wachowskis, which also came out in 1999, contains humans with bioports so those who have taken the red pill can get back into the virtual reality called The Matrix. Now, in these films, David Cronenberg displays his extreme awareness of self. Cronenberg sees technology as an extension of humans to be accepted and regaled. 2002 found Cronenberg still dealing cinematically with delusions and a false reality in Spider, starring Ralph Fiennes, a character whose reality is challenged by childhood trauma. Also during the first part of this century, Cronenberg shifted slightly in his thoughts about technology and focused more on violence. A few years later, we find Cronenberg working for the first time with Viggo Mortensen in one of my favorite Cronenberg films, A History of Violence. Along with Maria Bello, William Hurt, and Ed Harris, when confronted by a robber at his eatery, we find out that Viggo's character has some skills, and it turns out he is the younger brother of a Philadelphia mobster. Mortensen and Hurt received accolades for their performances. Writer Josh Olson received praise for his screenplay, and Cronenberg for the overall atmosphere. The script was based on a graphic novel of the same name. Now, while not as weird as his usual material, this film still deals with a false reality. Mortensen's character is not really who he claims to be. Viggo worked again with Cronenberg in Eastern Promises in 2007, now this time playing a Russian mobster on the trail of finding the truth along with Naomi Watts. the fate of a child rape and murder in London's Russia's mob. And again in 2011 playing Sigmund Freud in Cronenberg's adaptation of Christopher Hampton's play The Talking Cure in John Kerr's novel A Dangerous Method. Now, playing opposite Michael Fassbender, who portrays Carl Jung, and Keira Knightley at the center of this film, plays the first woman psychoanalyst, a physician, and Jung's mistress, Sabina Spielring. 2012, David once again adapts a literary property, this time by Don DeLillo. Cosmopolis is a strange story starring Robert Pattinson, Sarah Gadon, and Paul Giamatti in a tale of a young billionaire taking a trip in his limousine through downtown Manhattan during extreme traffic, that day watching as his life and his fortune all fall apart. If this is the first time you have visited this channel, we cover the genres of sci-fi, horror, action-adventure, prop culture, and all things geek. If you find the video informative or entertaining, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to be aware of my new content. Now, according to the director, he wrote the screenplay for Crimes of the Future 20 years ago in the early 1990s. However, Cronenberg also claims that he did nothing to update his earlier script. The themes of the film are still relevant today, even more so. In the not-too-distant future, the devastating impacts of climate change and pollution have prompted tremendous developments in biotechnology, including the construction of machines and analog computers that can directly interact and control biological functions. Now, the film opens with a scene of a ship in the distance, listed over on its side. Simultaneously, humanity has gone through a variety of biological modifications, if you will, removing physical pain and infectious disease for the vast majority. Now, this enables surgery to be safely conducted on conscious people in everyday settings. It's the most significant of these changes. However, other humans undergoing more profound physiological changes occur. Now, one of them, Brecken, an 8-year-old boy, is digging for something at the water's edge. The boy has the intrinsic ability to absorb and digest plastics as food. Now, the reports from the Cannes premiere showed that some people walked out of the theater in disgust. And I can see why, but it's not what you think. The scene doesn't leave anything to the imagination, but it is sad and tragic. Brecken's mother, convinced that he is inhuman, suffocates him with a pillow. The woman calls the child's father, a guy named Lang. Scott Speedman from Underworld fame plays Lang, while seemingly a minor scene supposedly to provide context for this world. The child and his fate is a central touchpoint in the film and humanity's history. We find that the character of Saul Tenser, whom Viggo plays, he's a performance artist. But then again, who is it nowadays? They take advantage of Tenser's accelerated evolutionary syndrome, a condition that causes the body to generate new vestigial organs, and by surgically removing them in front of a live audience. Now, Tenser relies on several specialized biomechanical devices, including a bed, a machine via which Caprice performs surgery on him, and a chair that assists him with eating due to his syndrome's chronic agony and severe respiratory and intestinal difficulties. Now, there's a weird organ-looking sack thing hanging from the ceiling, and seduced Caprice enters the room and opens the sack thing to unveil Saul resting within. Leia Seydoux plays Caprice. Of course, we remember Leia from the last two 007 films playing the latest and final Bond girl. However, she also starred in other films where the body is the primary focus. Saul is in pain. Saul is always in pain. How would you feel internally if you start having your existing organs squeezed by tumorous growths? One of the first growths that his partner Caprice identifies in the film is some sort of endocrine gland. Caprice used to be a trauma surgeon, and this is how she and Saul met. Tenser and Caprice meet with officials from the National Organ Registry, a governmental agency tasked with cataloging and keeping newly evolved organs to enforce the state's prohibitions on human evolution. Now, Saul's aesthetic goals captivate one of the bureaucrats, the jittery Timlin. She tells Tenser at one of his successful shows that surgery is the new sex, a statement that Tenser appears to appreciate. While listed as one of the show's stars, Kristen Stewart is, in fact, more of a supporting character. However, Her understated performance shines through with nothing over the top, but captivates the underlying allure of cutting and opening the body while rejecting humanity's eventual transhumanism. Now, transhumanism is a social and intellectual movement focused on the discovery and development of robust human enhancement and technology. Such technologies would improve human health and increase lifespans by boosting or expanding human sensory reception, affective ability, or cognitive capabilities. Now, unbeknownst to Caprice, Tensor is being used by a government police squad to infiltrate a group of radical evolutionists. Tensor meets a series of contacts through other physical performance art exhibitions. There's one featuring a dance with ears sewn all over the body that brings him to the evolutionists. Now, with the sewn-on ears, the dancer has no true mutations or evolutionary adaptations. He is a charlatan, unlike Saul. Now, a former cosmetic surgeon named Nassatir builds a vaginal zippered cavern in Tensor's stomach, which Caprice uses as in an oral sex act to access Tensor's organs. Caprice continues to network with other performers, ultimately opting for a decorative cosmetic surgery on her forehead. Now, Saul visits with Timlin, who exposes the evolutionists' agenda. They have chosen to alter digestive systems so that they can ingest plastic and other man-made poisons. Their primary source of nutrition is a purple manufactured candy bar of hazardous waste that is fatal to everybody else. Lang is the cell's leader, and his kid Brecken was conceived with the ability to consume plastic, demonstrating the government's skepticism of human evolution. Aroused by Saul's surgeries, Timlin wants to have sex with Tensor, but he refuses since the old kind of sex is just not for him. Lang approaches Saul and Caprice, asking them to unveil the cell's anti-government goal through a public postmortem of Brecken, which will highlight his advanced digestive system. Now, Saul agrees after some contemplation. Now, he performs the autopsy in front of Timlin, Lang, and many others, but it is evident that the dead boy's original organ system has been surgically changed. Thwarted from trying to expose natural evolution, Lang sobs as he leaves the show and that his son's death was, after all, in vain. Outside, sitting on the stairs, he is contacted by two agents claiming to be from the company that makes Tensor's biomedical machines. They assassinate Lang by pushing power drills into his head, just like they did with Nassatir. Timlin substituted Brecken's organs to keep the divergence in human evolution hidden from the public. Now, according to Tensor's relationship with the police unit, Wilker Bonjour plays the vice cop. He usually meets Saul by the docks. The cop and Saul exchange information. For the most part, these exchanges allow us, the audience, in on some of the clues as to what is happening in politics and society of the future. But unfortunately, the future in this film isn't bright, but somewhat bleak. The movie was filmed in Greece, and everything looks very old, with peeling paint. Green and blue color palette dominates the film with light orange tinges throughout the film. There are no good or bad guys in the film that I can see. Furthermore, the film does not show a clear black and white society in the future. Instead, we see humanity struggling to adapt to an ever-changing world. Cronenberg relishes in showing us that, despite how we have changed the world, humanity will prevail by adapting to the climate and our pollution. Saul is distraught with his part in the death of Lang, and he grieves the death of Brecken. He notifies his vice cop handler that he will no longer serve them anymore. He tells this cop matter-of-factly, mentioning the cell's evolution beliefs. Apparently, Saul Tensor is taken aside. Now, Tensor finds it challenging to eat on his chair. He requires a plastic bar from Caprice. He eats the purple candy bar, looks into Caprice's camera, and cries a tear while Caprice records him. A tear of joy or resigning to his fate. This is a strange film, a strange experience, and a strange existence. Saul and Caprice have an interesting relationship, and as humans go into the future, we will see how they approach romantic, otherwise relationships. As a result, we're essentially learning everything there is to know. These two individuals tell us a lot of stuff, but not everything we need to know, and they do so skillfully. Now, none of what we see on screen is overly sexual or even horrific. Léa Seydoux' character apparently is somewhat based on Gina Pane, a performance artist from the late last century. Pane's performance work contained a lot of self-inflicted damage, which set her apart from most other female body artists of the 1970s. Pane hoped that by cutting her skin with razor blades or putting out fires with her bare hands and feet, the viewer would be compelled to identify with her agony. Early performances, or actions as she preferred to call them, were sometimes eclipsed by her prodigious photographic and sculptural output. Pane's work, however, was centered on the flesh, literally or metaphorically. Caprice is essentially the film's heart and soul. I was emotionally drawn to her character, and I feel she is the only one in the film that truly elicits an emotional response from the audience. With her devotion to Saul, she's his surgeon, and he's her business partner. They share an intimacy beyond what we as an audience expect to see in a film that, in its heart, a strange romance. Viggo Mortensen's Saul is stoic, calm, and reserved. He's not flamboyant, but determined. He knows the world is evolving. He is the mind of this film, while Caprice is the emotional element, and Saul is cerebral. Several secondary characters make statements reflecting Cronenberg's feeling about pain and how he feels about surgery or cutting. In addition, they act like exclamation points to highlight thoughts about this future society. Howard Shore is a Canadian composer who, as of this date, has scored all of Cronenberg's films, except for 1983's The Dead Zone. Shore has scored over 80 films, including Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit trilogy. That said, Howard Shore sometimes provides a somber, dirge-like atmosphere with sad or melancholia. His score for The Section is the new surgery scene, while Dark is somewhat still hopeful. The tone of the film seems distant and unconnected. Of all the film's characters that I had any connection to the audience, I believe was Caprice. Now, on the other hand, Saul seems distant and direct. Now, did I like this film? Yes and no. I recommend this film to more hardcore sci-fi fans or fans of the body horror subgenre. However, I didn't think this film was horrific with the gore. I thought it was very tolerable. Or am I just that insensitive to it now? I think the film points out that we, as a species, will have to adapt to an ever-changing and more toxic environment. Now, when I went to see the film, we were alone in the theater, and there wasn't a lot of promotion, at least in my area, which I thought was strange for a crazy film like this. Cronenberg is an exciting and well-spoken writer and director. His films are thought-provoking, and the body horror accentuates the point the director wants to make. Now, I do think that the body and the technology combination is just a reflection of what we are experiencing now and in the future. The film is rated R, and it's 1 hour and 47 minutes long. If you have seen David Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future, let me know what you think. Also, if you found this video interesting, please hit the like button and share the video. Oh, by the way, take a look at this video right there. I'll see you next time. Take care.